Tom was an ordinary man who lived in a quiet neighborhood at the edge of town. He had worked for many years as a technician in a local company, and after saving carefully, he bought a corner house with a wide driveway and a small garden in the front. It was not a grand place, but it was his pride. Tom loved to fix things with his own hands, and he enjoyed making improvements little by little. One of the first things he had installed years ago was a simple iron gate at the entrance of his driveway. It was painted black, strong enough to keep his property private and easy to open whenever he wanted to drive in or out. The gate had always been there, and Tom had never thought of it as a problem. He kept it well painted, made sure the hinges were oiled, and sometimes decorated it with small lights during the holidays. For Tom, the gate gave him a feeling of comfort. It separated his personal space from the busy street, and it also gave his dog, Max, a safe place to run around without the risk of running onto the road. One morning, as the sun rose and the air was cool, Tom stepped outside to water the plants in his garden. He noticed something unusual on his gate. A white envelope was pinned neatly between the bars. He pulled it out, curious, and saw the official seal of the Homeowners Association, the HOA. At first, he thought it might be a general notice about community activities, maybe about the park cleaning or an upcoming festival. But when he opened the envelope and read the letter, his expression changed. The notice demanded that Tom remove his gate. The words were direct and cold, stating that the gate was blocking community access to a walkway behind his property. The letter warned that if he did not remove the gate within 30 days, the HOA would begin daily fines and might even take legal action. Tom stood frozen, reading the letter again and again. His gate had nothing to do with any community access. The walkway behind his house was not a public space. It was part of his own property, a strip of land that connected to his backyard. He had checked the property map when he bought the house, and everything was clear. The HOA's demand did not make sense. As Tom stood there, his neighbor from across the street, Anna, waved at him. She was on her way to work but noticed the serious look on his face. "Morning, Tom," she called out. "Is everything all right?" Tom held up the paper. "Got this from the HOA. They're telling me to remove my gate. They say it blocks community access." Anna frowned. "Community access? That's strange. Your gate has been here for years. Nobody uses that back area except you. It's your land, isn't it?" "Yes," Tom replied firmly. "I have the documents. This makes no sense." Another neighbor, David, walked by with his morning coffee. He overheard their conversation and joined in. "The HOA again? They're always picking on someone. Last year they told me my fence was 2 inches too high. 2 inches. I had to argue for weeks before they left me alone." Tom felt a mix of anger and disbelief. He had always followed the rules, paid his fees on time, and kept his property neat. Yet here was the HOA demanding something unreasonable. That entire day, the notice weighed heavily on his mind. While at work, he could not concentrate. He kept thinking of the gate, the letter, and the possible fines. He imagined the stress of daily arguments with the board. By evening, when he returned home, he decided he would not let the matter go quietly. He needed to prepare. Tom pulled out the folder where he had kept all the documents from when he bought the house. There was the property deed, the survey map, and the permit for building the gate. He spread them across his dining table and studied each paper carefully. The map clearly showed the land boundary, including the area behind his house. It belonged to him, not the community. The permit had been issued by the city office years ago, approving the construction of the gate. He was within his rights. The more Tom looked at the papers, the more confident he felt. But at the same time, he realized that the HOA would not back down easily. They often used pressure and intimidation. Some neighbors gave in simply because they did not want the trouble. Tom, however, was not willing to remove something that was legally his. Later that evening, Tom took Max for a walk around the block. As he passed by different houses, he noticed how some neighbors kept their lawns perfect while others were more relaxed. The HOA often sent letters about small issues like grass height or trash bins being left outside too long. But this time, Tom felt the issue was bigger. It was not about the look of his home. It was about his right to keep what was his. When he returned, he saw Anna waiting near his driveway. She looked concerned. "I asked around a little," Anna said. "Some people heard that the HOA board has been talking about making the back walkway more open. Maybe they want to connect it with the park trail. But Tom, that's your property. They can't just take it from you. Tom nodded. Exactly. They're trying to twist the rules, but I won't let them. Anna gave him an encouraging smile. Good. Don't let them bully you. A lot of neighbors respect you. If you stand up, people will notice. That night, Tom sat on his porch thinking deeply. The gate stood quietly in front of him, solid and steady. It was not just metal bars anymore. It had become a symbol of his independence. The HOA's notice had turned it into more than a piece of property. It was now a matter of principle. Tom promised himself that he would attend the next HOA meeting. He would not go empty-handed. He would take all his documents, speak clearly, and defend his rights. He knew it would not be easy, but he also knew that backing down would only invite more unfair treatment in the future. The next few days moved slowly. Every time Tom came home from work, he checked the gate, half expecting another envelope pinned to it. Max barked happily when Tom arrived, but Tom's mind stayed occupied with the problem. On Friday evening, while Tom was mowing his lawn, another neighbor named Paul stopped by. Paul was older, retired, and had lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years. I heard about the notice, Paul said, leaning on his walking stick. Don't let them scare you. The HOA tried to tell me once that I couldn't keep bird feeders in my yard. I showed them the regulations and they had no answer. They like to act powerful, but they only succeed if people don't fight back. Tom appreciated Paul's words. They gave him more courage. He realized he was not alone. Many neighbors had faced similar unfair treatment. The difference was that most people gave in to avoid stress. Tom, however, had decided to resist. On Sunday, Tom sat at his desk and began to prepare for the meeting. He wrote notes in simple language listing each point. The gate was legal, the property was his, the permit was valid, and the walkway was private land. He also planned to ask the HOA board a direct question. Why were they demanding access to something that was not theirs? The more he prepared, the calmer he felt. The fear slowly faded, replaced by determination. By the end of the week, Tom was ready. He placed all his papers neatly in a folder, kept his notes in his pocket, and circled the date of the HOA meeting on his calendar. The gate, silent and unmoving, stood as it always had. But for Tom, it was no longer just part of his home. It had become the first step in a battle he was not willing to lose. The day of the HOA meeting arrived and Tom woke up early. He felt a little nervous, but he also felt ready. He had spent the past week reviewing his papers, reading every line of his property documents and preparing his arguments. He wanted to speak clearly and calmly, no matter how much pressure the board tried to put on him. That morning, Tom stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his shirt collar. He reminded himself that he was not doing anything wrong. The gate was legal, the land was his, and the HOA had no right to demand its removal. He took a deep breath, grabbed the folder with all his documents, and gave Max a pat on the head before leaving. The meeting was held at the community hall, a large room with rows of folding chairs and a long table at the front, where the board members sat. When Tom arrived, he noticed a larger crowd than usual. Some people had come out of curiosity, others because they had their own issues to raise. Tom found a seat near the middle. He looked around and saw familiar faces. Anna sat 2 rows ahead, giving him a small smile of encouragement. Paul, the older neighbor, sat near the back, his walking stick resting by his side. It made Tom feel less alone to see them there. At the front, the head of the HOA board, Mr. Clark, adjusted his glasses and tapped the microphone. He was a tall man in his 50s with sharp features and a voice that carried across the room. He liked to speak with authority, and everyone knew he enjoyed running the meetings more than anyone else. Good evening, everyone, Mr. Clark began. Thank you for attending. As always, we appreciate your involvement in keeping our community beautiful, safe, and orderly. Tonight, we will address several matters, including landscaping rules, parking guidelines, and one important compliance issue. Tom knew exactly what that compliance issue was. His gate. The meeting moved through the first few items quickly. People raised small concerns about trash pickup and broken streetlights. Then Mr. Clark cleared his throat and leaned forward. Now, regarding the property on the corner lot, he said, glancing at Tom. It has come to our attention that the iron gate installed there is blocking community access to the rear walkway. This is against our guidelines. We have issued a notice for removal and we expect compliance. Tonight we will hear from the homeowner, though the matter is quite clear. Murmurs spread through the room. Some neighbors turned their heads toward Tom, waiting to hear what he would say. Tom stood up slowly, holding his folder. He walked to the front, his steps steady, and stood before the board. "Good evening," he said. "My name is Tom, and I live at the corner lot. I received the notice, and I am here to explain why it is not correct." Mr. Clark folded his arms, clearly impatient, but Tom continued. He opened his folder and held up the property map. "This is the official survey map of my property," Tom said. "The land behind my house, including the walkway, belongs to me. It is not community property. The deed shows the boundaries clearly. The gate stands fully within my land." He then placed the map on the table for the board to see. Next, Tom pulled out another document. "This is the building permit issued by the city when I installed the gate. The structure was approved and has been standing for years without any problem. It is legal and does not violate city codes." He placed the permit beside the map. Finally, he looked directly at the board members. "The notice says I am blocking community access. That statement is false. The walkway is not a public path. It is private property. No one except myself has the right to use it." The room grew quiet. Some neighbors leaned forward, curious. Mr. Clark cleared his throat. "While the documents may show ownership, the spirit of the community is about openness. A gate like yours sends the wrong message. It creates division instead of harmony. We want our neighborhood to feel welcoming." Tom kept his voice calm. "With respect, Mr. Clark, the gate has stood for many years. No one has complained until now. It does not block the street. It does not block a park. It does not block a community feature. It only marks the boundary of my home, which is my right. Privacy and security are also part of a welcoming community." From the audience, a voice called out, "He's right. The gate doesn't bother anyone." It was Anna speaking firmly. "I walk by that gate every day. It looks fine and it's on his land." Another neighbor added, "Why is the HOA wasting time on this? We have broken benches in the park that need fixing. Shouldn't we focus on that instead?" The murmurs grew louder. People were beginning to side with Tom. One of the board members, a woman named Mrs. Hall, adjusted her papers nervously. "Mr. Clark," she said softly, "if the documents are correct, perhaps this matter needs review. We should not enforce something outside our authority." Mr. Clark frowned, clearly unhappy with her hesitation. He raised his voice. "The HOA has the responsibility to maintain the image of this neighborhood. Gates like this." But before he could finish, Paul stood up from the back, leaning on his stick. "With all due respect, the gate is not the problem. The problem is the HOA stretching its power. I've lived here longer than most, and I can tell you this. Homeowners have rights. If Tom has his papers, then that should be the end of it." The room filled with clapping. Not everyone clapped, but enough did to make the board uneasy. Tom felt a wave of relief. He had expected to be cornered, but instead he had support. Still, he stayed calm and respectful. "I am not here to fight," he said. "I simply want fairness. I will not remove a legal structure from my property. I will not pay fines for something that is within my rights." Mr. Clark, red in the face, leaned forward. "Then you leave us no choice but to escalate." Tom looked him straight in the eye. "If you choose to escalate, I will defend myself with the law. I have every document to support my case." The silence that followed was heavy. The board members exchanged looks, and a few seemed uncomfortable with Mr. Clark's hard stance. Finally, Mrs. Hall spoke again. "We should take this under review. Until then, no further action should be taken." The gavel came down and the matter was postponed. Tom returned to his seat, his heart beating fast, but he felt proud. He had stood his ground and spoken clearly. He had not allowed fear to control him. Neighbors patted his shoulder as he sat down. Anna whispered, "You did great." When the meeting ended, people gathered outside, talking in groups. Several came up to Tom, thanking him for standing up. One young couple said they had also received unfair notices in the past but had been too afraid to challenge them. Another neighbor admitted that seeing Tom's confidence gave them courage. Tom walked home that night under the soft glow of the streetlights. Max wagged his tail happily at the sight of him. Tom looked at his gate, standing tall and silent, and smiled. The battle was not over, but something had changed. He now knew that the HOA's power was not absolute. It only worked when people gave in. By standing up, he had opened the door for others to question unfair rules. But Tom also knew one thing clearly. If the HOA thought he would remove his gate, they were mistaken. In fact, an idea was already forming in his mind. If they wanted to fight over the gate, he would make it even better. He would not only keep his gate, but he would upgrade it into something stronger, smarter, and more impressive. That thought made him smile as he walked into his house, ready for the next chapter of the fight. After the meeting, Tom felt a new kind of energy. He had walked into the community hall with a heavy heart, but he had walked out with courage. He had faced the board, presented his documents, and received support from his neighbors. Still, he knew the HOA was not done with him. Mr. Clark would not let the matter rest so easily. That night, Tom sat on his porch, sipping tea and looking at his gate. The iron bars stood tall, black and strong, but plain. He thought about how the HOA claimed it was unwelcoming and out of harmony with the neighborhood. Tom shook his head. The truth was, they did not like seeing someone stand firm. They wanted control. Then an idea formed in his mind. If the HOA wanted to call his gate a problem, he would turn it into something even greater. He would upgrade it not only to protect his property, but also to show that his choices were his own. The next morning, Tom opened his notebook and began sketching ideas. He was not an artist, but he knew what he wanted. A taller gate, stronger, with smooth sliding doors instead of a simple swing. He imagined decorative lights along the posts, so at night it would glow softly instead of looking plain. He also thought of adding modern features like a keypad entry or even a remote-controlled system. For a few days, Tom researched contractors and suppliers. He called around, asked for quotes, and compared options. Finally, he found a small local company that specialized in custom gates. The owner, a man named Carl, came by to look at the property. Carl ran his hand along the old gate. "Solid work," he said. "But if you want something more modern, we can definitely help. Sliding mechanism, automatic opener, lights, you name it. We can even add a design that blends with your garden style." Tom nodded. "I want it to look strong but also welcoming. I want it to show that privacy and beauty can exist together." Carl smiled. "I like that. We'll make something that fits you perfectly." Work began the following weekend. Tom watched with excitement as the old hinges were removed and new posts were set deep into the ground. Max barked curiously at the workers, running back and forth in the yard as if guarding the process. Day by day, the new gate began to take shape. The sliding track was installed with precision, and the frame rose taller than before, giving the entrance a sense of elegance. Decorative curves were added along the top, giving it character without being flashy. When the final coat of black paint was applied, it gleamed in the sunlight. But the part Tom loved most came at night. Small LED lights were installed along the posts, glowing softly in warm tones. When the sun went down, the gate looked inviting instead of harsh. It was no longer just a barrier. It was a statement of pride. Neighbors began to notice. As they walked by, some stopped to admire the changes. Anna came over one evening, smiling wide. "Tom, this looks amazing. It's not just a gate now. It's art. Honestly, it makes the whole street look better." Another neighbor, the young couple who had thanked him after the meeting, nodded in agreement. "You've turned their complaint into something beautiful. Now they can't even say it looks bad." Tom felt proud. He had not only defended himself, but had also improved his home. Of course, it did not take long for the HOA to respond. A week after the installation was complete, Tom found another envelope in his mailbox. This time, the letter was even harsher. The board claimed he had expanded the violation by upgrading the gate. They said the new design was too tall and out of uniformity with the neighborhood. They warned that fines would begin immediately if he did not comply. Tom read the letter calmly, then smiled. He had been expecting this. He walked back inside, opened his folder, and pulled out the new building permit he had requested before starting the project. Everything had been done legally. The city had approved the height, the design, and the sliding system. That evening, Tom wrote a polite but firm reply. He attached copies of the permit and reminded the HOA that his property rights were clear. He ended the letter with one line that showed his confidence. "This gate stands as a lawful structure on my property. No action from the HOA can override the law." He mailed the letter the next morning. Days passed, and Tom carried on with his life. He went to work, took Max for walks, and enjoyed evenings by his upgraded gate. But he noticed something different in the neighborhood. More and more people were talking about his stand. One afternoon, Mrs. Green, an elderly neighbor who rarely spoke at meetings, stopped by while Tom was watering his plants. She leaned on her cane and looked at the glowing gate lights. "Tom, she said kindly. "I want to thank you. For years, the HOA has been bossy. They told me to cut down my rose bushes once because they said they looked messy. I cried for days. But when I see you standing up for yourself, it gives me hope. Maybe it's time more of us spoke out." Tom felt touched. He realized his fight was no longer just about his gate. It had become something larger. He was giving people courage. The following weekend, a small group of neighbors gathered in his front yard. They brought folding chairs and coffee, turning it into an informal meeting. They wanted to discuss the HOA and how it had been treating people. Stories poured out, letters about lawn decorations, warnings about paint colors, threats over parked cars. Tom listened carefully, nodding. The HOA should be about helping the community, not controlling it. If they overstep, we have the right to push back. The law protects us. Anna added, "Tom has shown us that we don't have to just accept everything. If we stand together, they can't intimidate us." Everyone agreed. The gathering ended with laughter and relief. For once, people felt united instead of fearful. Meanwhile, Mr. Clark was growing restless. At the next official HOA board meeting, he brought up Tom's gate again, waving papers in frustration. "This man is challenging our authority. If we allow this, others will follow. Soon we'll have chaos in the neighborhood." But some board members hesitated. Mrs. Hall reminded him, "He has the permits. His gate is legal. If we keep pushing, we risk losing credibility." Still, Mr. Clark insisted. He wanted to make Tom an example. Tom, however, was ready for any move. He had his folder, his documents, and now the quiet but growing support of his neighbors. The HOA could write letters and make threats, but Tom had learned something important. When you know your rights, you do not have to be afraid. The upgraded gate stood tall every day, sliding open smoothly when Tom drove in, glowing warmly when the night fell. It had become more than an entrance. It had become a symbol of strength, not just for Tom, but for many in the neighborhood. And deep down, Tom knew this was only the beginning. The HOA would not give up, but neither would he. He was ready for the turning point that was about to come. The upgraded gate stood proudly at the corner of the neighborhood, glowing softly each night. Neighbors who passed by often slowed down to admire it. What had once been a simple iron barrier was now a symbol of dignity and courage. For Tom, the gate represented more than his property. It was proof that fairness could stand tall against pressure. But not everyone was happy. Inside the board of the HOA, Mr. Clark grew restless. He felt his authority slipping away. At first, he thought Tom would give in quickly. Instead, Tom had stood firm, upgraded his gate, and gained the support of neighbors. Worse, people in the community were beginning to question the HOA's power. At the next board meeting, Mr. Clark slammed his hand on the table. "This cannot continue," he said sharply. "If we allow one person to ignore our orders, others will follow. Soon we'll have lawns uncut, fences too high, and rules broken everywhere." Mrs. Hall, who had always been more thoughtful, raised her eyebrows. "With respect, Clark, Tom has not broken any rule. He has his permits. The city approved his gate. If we keep pushing, we risk losing trust from the whole neighborhood." But Mr. Clark did not want to hear it. He believed the HOA was about control, and Tom's resistance felt like a challenge to his leadership. He decided to put more pressure on Tom. Within a week, Tom received another notice. This time it accused him of excessive lighting on his property, claiming the soft glow from his gate disturbed the community. Tom laughed when he read it. The lights were warm, gentle, and pointed downward. They disturbed no one. In fact, people had praised them. Still, Tom knew he had to respond properly. He wrote back, attaching photographs of the lights and a copy of the city's outdoor lighting standards. His lights followed every rule. Once again, the HOA had no ground. Word spread quickly. Neighbors shook their heads at the new complaint. Anna told him, "They're only making themselves look worse. Everyone can see the lights are harmless. It's almost funny now." Paul, the older neighbor, added, "The more they push, the more people lose respect for them. You've done nothing wrong, Tom. Just stay steady." Tom listened carefully. He realized something important. This fight was no longer about his gate alone. It had grown into a bigger question. How much power should the HOA really have? One Saturday afternoon, several neighbors gathered in Tom's front yard again. They brought chairs, tea, and snacks, turning it into another informal meeting. Families, elderly residents, and young couples all came. The group was larger than before. "Enough is enough," said a man named Mark who lived 3 houses down. "The HOA sent me a warning last month because my car was parked in front of my house overnight. It wasn't blocking anyone. I paid the fine because I didn't want trouble. But now I see we don't have to just accept everything." A woman named Laura nodded. "They told me to repaint my shutters because the color looked too bright. I spent money I didn't have just to avoid conflict. But Tom is right, they can't just invent rules. We should question them." As people shared their experiences, Tom listened with care. He did not want to become the leader of a rebellion, but he understood the power of unity. "I stood up for my gate because it was unfair," Tom said softly, "but I couldn't have done it without your support. If we all start speaking up, the HOA will have to listen. We have rights. The law protects us. They can't control everything just because they want to." The group agreed. Someone suggested that more people should attend the official meetings, not just a few. If the community showed up in numbers, the board could not ignore them. That idea spread quickly. The next HOA meeting was unlike any other. Usually only a small group of residents attended, but this time the hall was full. Families who had never spoken before sat in the chairs, ready to listen and speak. The board members were surprised, and Mr. Clark looked uneasy as he adjusted his papers. When the agenda reached Tom's gate again, Mr. Clark began with his usual tone of authority. "This matter remains unresolved. The structure continues to set the wrong tone for our community, and we must take action." But before he could continue, Anna stood up. "No, Mr. Clark, the gate is legal. It is beautiful. It adds value to the street. You cannot keep targeting one homeowner just because he stood up for himself." The room murmured with agreement. Another resident, Mark, raised his hand. "Why are we focusing so much on one man's gate when our park benches are broken and the streetlights near the entrance haven't worked for months? Shouldn't the HOA be fixing real problems instead of chasing shadows?" Clapping filled the room. People nodded and whispered. Mrs. Hall spoke gently. "The community has spoken. We should focus our efforts where they are needed. I recommend we stop pursuing the gate matter and direct our attention to improving shared spaces." Tom stayed quiet for most of the meeting, but when Mr. Clark tried to argue again, he finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm. "I respect this community. I respect the rules when they are fair. But respect goes both ways. The gate is mine, it is legal, and it harms no one. I will not remove it. I will not back down." The silence in the room was heavy. Then clapping broke out again, stronger than before. People were not just clapping for Tom, they were clapping for fairness. For the first time, Mr. Clark looked uncertain. His authority, which had once felt unquestioned, was slipping. He tried to raise his voice, but the mood of the room had shifted. The board could see it, and so could the residents. After the meeting, many neighbors surrounded Tom, thanking him again. Some shook his hand, others patted his shoulder. One woman even said, "You gave us all a voice tonight." Tom walked home under the stars, Max trotting happily beside him. His gate glowed softly at the corner, lighting the path. He felt tired but proud. He knew the HOA would not give up completely, but something had changed. The board no longer had the same power. The people were beginning to see through them. In the following weeks, Tom noticed a difference in the neighborhood. More people began to question notices they received. Instead of paying fines quietly, they asked for proof, for documents, for fairness. The HOA board meetings grew crowded, and the pressure on Mr. Clark increased. Mrs. Hall and 2 other members even suggested reviewing the rules to make them clearer and fairer. It was the first sign of real change. Tom's fight had turned into a turning point for the whole community. But deep inside, Tom knew the battle was not fully over. Mr. Clark was stubborn. He would try again in some way. Tom prepared himself for whatever came next. His folder of documents remained ready. His neighbors stood with him, and his gate stood tall, shining at night as a reminder that standing up for what is right can inspire others to do the same. The soft glow of Tom's upgraded gate became more than just a feature of his home. Over time, it turned into a quiet symbol of resistance and fairness. Neighbors often passed by and smiled, sometimes stopping to admire the craftsmanship or to greet Tom if he happened to be outside. For them, the gate was no longer just his. It was a reminder of their shared strength against unfair treatment. Yet as weeks passed, Tom remained cautious. He knew Mr. Clark would not let the matter go easily. A man so tied to control would never accept defeat quietly. Tom was right. One morning, Tom found another notice taped to his gate. This one accused him of obstructing community access, repeating the same words that had started the whole conflict months ago. But this time, the notice also mentioned potential legal action. It threatened to take him to court if he refused to remove the gate. Tom sighed as he read the paper. He felt anger, but it was mixed with calm determination. He had expected something like this. Instead of reacting quickly, he carefully placed the notice into his folder, alongside all the other documents he had collected. Later that evening, several neighbors gathered at his house after hearing about the new notice. Anna was the first to speak. "They're desperate, Tom. They know they're losing, so they're trying to scare you." Paul nodded, his hands folded in front of him. "It's their last weapon. But they don't realize how strong your case is, and they don't realize how much support you have now." Mark, the younger neighbor, leaned forward. "If they take you to court, we'll all stand with you. We'll testify if needed." "We won't let them win," Tom smiled faintly. "Thank you. That means a lot. I don't want this fight, but I also won't bow down. If they push me to court, then court it will be." The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. Instead of isolating Tom, the HOA's new threat brought people even closer to him. Many residents were upset that money from community fees might be wasted on a personal battle against one homeowner. At the next HOA meeting, the room was packed again. This time, even more residents showed up, standing along the walls when chairs filled. Mr. Clark sat stiffly at the table, his face stern. When the topic of Tom's gate came up, he cleared his throat and announced, "We have issued a final notice. If the gate is not removed within 30 days, we will pursue legal action on behalf of the community." The room erupted. People spoke all at once. Some raised their voices, demanding answers. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Anna stood and called out, "On behalf of the community? Did anyone here agree to spend our fees on this? Did anyone here vote for it?" Murmurs of no and never filled the room. Mark shouted from the back, "We pay those fees for repairs, for improvements, for the park, not for chasing one man's legal right to his gate." Mrs. Hall, who had grown more and more sympathetic toward Tom, leaned toward Mr. Clark. "This is going too far, Clark. We risk tearing apart this neighborhood. We cannot claim to represent the community when the community clearly disagrees." But Mr. Clark refused to back down. "The board has authority," he snapped. "We cannot allow one person to undermine us. If we fail to act, we lose control." "Rules will mean nothing," Tom stood up slowly. The room quieted as his voice carried. "Respectfully, Mr. Clark, rules do not mean anything if they are unjustly applied. I have followed every law. I have every permit. My gate is not illegal. What is happening here is not about community. It is about control. And the people in this room can see that." Applause broke out. Some people even stood to clap. Mr. Clark banged the table, trying to restore order. But the energy in the room had shifted completely. For the first time, it was clear that the majority stood with Tom, not with the board's threats. That night, as Tom walked home, he felt a mixture of exhaustion and strength. He knew the board might still try to push forward, but the balance of power had changed. The HOA could no longer pretend to act in the community's name. Days turned into weeks and tension grew. The board sent another letter about legal action, but this time many residents responded with letters of their own, demanding that their fees not be used for such purposes. Some even began petitioning to hold a vote to replace certain board members. Finally, the moment came. A letter arrived from the HOA's lawyer, formally stating that they intended to bring the matter to court. Tom read it carefully, then contacted his own lawyer, a calm and experienced man named Mr. Davis, who lived in a nearby town. Mr. Davis listened to Tom's story, looked over the folder of documents and smiled. "You are well prepared. They don't have a case, and with the community on your side, this will not end the way they hope." The court date was set. On the morning of the hearing, Tom walked into the courthouse with steady steps. Anna, Paul, Mark, and several other neighbors came to support him. Their presence gave him courage. Across the aisle, Mr. Clark sat with the HOA's lawyer, looking confident but tense. The judge listened carefully as both sides presented their arguments. The HOA's lawyer claimed the gate blocked community access and violated the spirit of neighborhood rules. But when pressed for written evidence, he struggled. The rules never mentioned such a restriction. Then it was Tom's turn. Mr. Davis stood and spoke clearly. Your Honor, my client has followed every law and obtained every required permit. This gate is not illegal. The HOA has targeted him without cause. Furthermore, this lawsuit does not represent the will of the community. In fact, many residents are here today to show their support for Mr. Tom. Several neighbors stood when Mr. Davis gestured toward them. The judge looked at them with interest, then turned back to the HOA's lawyer. Do you have any evidence that this gate causes harm to the community? The lawyer hesitated, then admitted, No, Your Honor, only the board's interpretation of access requirements. The judge leaned back, thoughtful. After a pause, he delivered his decision. This court finds that the homeowner, Mr. Tom, has acted within his legal rights. The HOA has no authority to demand the removal of the gate. Furthermore, this lawsuit represents a misuse of community funds. I strongly recommend that the board reconsider how it exercises its power in the future. Case dismissed. Relief washed over Tom as the gavel struck. His neighbors cheered quietly, shaking his hand and patting his back. Even the judge gave him a small nod, as though recognizing the courage it had taken to stand firm. Mr. Clark, however, looked defeated. His face was pale as he gathered his papers. For the first time, his authority had not just been questioned, it had been broken in a court of law. Back in the neighborhood, news of the victory spread quickly. People celebrated not just Tom's win, but the win for fairness. The petition to remove certain board members gained momentum, and within a month, a new election was held. Mr. Clark lost his position, replaced by members who promised to listen to the community. Mrs. Hall, who had always shown fairness, was elected as the new head of the HOA. Her first action was to reassure everyone that the board would now focus on real improvements, repairing the park, fixing the lights, and maintaining the shared spaces that mattered most. Tom, meanwhile, returned to his quiet life. He did not seek attention, but everywhere he went, neighbors smiled at him with gratitude. Children played near his yard and parents greeted him warmly. The gate, still standing tall, had become a landmark of trust. One evening, as Tom sat on his porch with Max at his feet, Anna stopped by with a smile. You know, Tom, you didn't just win for yourself. You changed this whole place. People are braver now. They speak up. They know their voice matters. Tom looked at the glowing gate and nodded. I only did what felt right, but I'm glad it helped others too. The neighborhood slowly transformed. With new leadership, meetings became more open and productive. Instead of fear, there was cooperation. Instead of silence, there were conversations. And every time someone passed by Tom's gate, they remembered that change was possible when one person stood firm and others stood beside him. The battle was over, but the lesson remained. Rules should guide, not control. Power should serve, not dominate. And a community should always belong to the people who live in it, not just those who claim to lead. Tom's gate never had to be removed. Instead, it remained as a quiet reminder of fairness, courage, and unity for years to come.